Howdy folks, welcome back. Papa Todd Stone, here to bring you some more wilderness survival facts, fun things to try in a hard time that we're living in right now. Appreciate you being here. If you're new here, please like and subscribe. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the number 2 thing you need to be thinking about, the second most important thing after shelter, and that's water. Water can be a huge factor in your ability to survive, and finding it, I think we've kind of taken it for granted. Turn on the tap, it's right there, it's easy for us to get to, but ultimately if we didn't have that, it would be significantly harder. So today we're going to talk about how to find it, how to collect it, how to treat it, and then ultimately how to store it. So stick around. So let's talk about finding water. The situation might be, if you're in a survival situation, and you've maybe had a little bit of water and you've been maybe potentially rationing that water and you need to find some more. We talked in a previous video, I think it was the one on navigation and getting lost, where we were using maps to find high points and low points. And those low points typically are creeks, right? They might be a dry creek. There might be a flowing creek here where you might have a spring involved, which is good. And ultimately those flow into larger rivers. And those larger rivers, obviously, many, many years ago, were kind of the means of navigation. And so our civilizations kind of came about because of these waterways. We came up those waterways, we traded on those waterways, we had commerce. And ultimately, if you know where the waterways are, typically you're going to run into some sort of civilization one way or another. So when you find a creek or waterway, it doesn't even matter if it has water. You got to remember, looking for them can be a little bit harder than you think unless you know a few tricks. Now, water didn't always just bring us good things. Many times it's brought us death. You had typhoid, you had cholera, you had floods, all those negative things that can come along with those waterways too. So we always want to be aware of those things. But all in all, water is an extremely important element to life. And you begin to feel those effects very, very quickly. And unfortunately, it's a silent killer because it starts messing with your brain first. And when you start to lose your faculty in your brain, you start making bad decisions. And those bad decisions can lead to the ultimate worst outcome, obviously. So in the approach you want to take to water, we're going to start with a top-down approach. We're going to talk strictly about mountainous areas and on its way down, because we want to be sure we're getting water from the highest point possible. The lower it gets, the more contamination it gets. If we started in a mountain situation where we had some cliffs, or even some of the highest points in mountainous areas will hold glaciers, right, in those cliffs. But don't think you can drink glacier water straight from a cube of ice. There are very fine ground up pieces of stone in ice. And so you definitely want to melt that. You don't want that getting in your gut. That's going to create all kinds of problems for you. Crevasses, places where you have water going down into stone, any of those areas where it comes in contact with that, you need to be careful. So go ahead and melt it, and that's the best way to handle those. Now, where else can we look for those? All kinds of crevices and areas where we start to see some vegetation. Where the vegetation might be at its highest point are typically where water tends to go during snowmelt. And so those trees and shrubs would be the first thing I would start to look for. And as you get further down into those creeks, even if they're dry, you want to be able to look for those locations that might have bends in the river or in the creek. And in those bends, typically there's a lot of washout. Either it can be some really low pools that have filled in with gravel or sand. And in that gravel and sand, you're going to have water still sitting down there, and you want to get down there to it. So that's a great location to look for those kinds of things. Other sign that you want to look out for are animal tracks. Animal tracks will lead you to water typically. Food and water and bedding is the three locations, but ultimately they don't get too far from a source of water. Bees are another one. About the maximum a bee will be from water is about 3 miles at the most. But you can typically find, if they're eating, they go back to a hive and then they go to water. Those three things. So if you can keep an eye out on those things, they'll kind of give you an idea of where you might be able to find a good resource for water. Let's talk about the effects of dehydration. Your body is majority water, right? And just losing 1%, your body starts to feel the effects of that. So it kind of breaks down into three different time frames or three different percentages of water lost. So during the percentage of 1 to 5% water lost, you will start to get, your lips will start to get a little bit dry, your mouth will get a little bit dry. You'll feel a little bit of thirst and discomfort ultimately. You might even get a little bit lethargic or start to feel a little bit irritated to some degree. Many times you'll have a lack of appetite and your skin will be a little bit flush as well. Your pulse will begin to increase and you'll occasionally start to feel a little bit nauseous to your stomach. And then as you continue to progress up to 5%, you'll start to feel a little bit of weakness. You'll just feel like you're not 100%, you're not really feeling that great. Now as you add to this, and have less and less water to your system, 6 to 10%, you're going to see some significant changes. You'll have a significant headache. You'll have some dizziness. The dry mouth gets a lot worse. You'll start to feel some tingling in your limbs, like your fingers, your hands, your arms, maybe a little bit around your ears, a little bit. You'll start to feel some numbness as well. The dizziness will continue to get more and more increasing. If you start to see your skin turn a little bit blue, that's pretty common too during this phase. Probably not talking a lot, but if you're with someone else and you start to notice that your speech is getting a little bit slurred, that's a big sign to your mental capacity starting to diminish there significantly. You may also have some difficulty breathing. Now, if you're in a mountainous area, that's probably going to be harder to see, but start to notice whether or not you're walking normally. If you start to feel like you're tripping a lot or you're just becoming a little bit lethargic, those are huge signs to get some water as quickly as possible. And again, right about 10%, you're going to start to get some blurry vision. And when that blurry vision starts, you're entering the third and final phase. So that's not good. Not only does your vision get blurry, now it starts to get dark. Even if you're outside, it almost feels a little bit like an eclipse is happening. If you've ever seen an eclipse, your eyes start to darken up a little bit because now your organs, from about 11 to 12%, they're losing the water that keeps them functioning. This is when the delirium sets in. Your tongue starts to swell. That's another huge indicator. Your limbs will start to twitch a little bit. Your eyes will start to twitch a little bit. Your face will start to twitch. You might even start to notice that your hearing is starting to go. Your ears might be ringing significantly, and your skin starts to lose its ability to stretch. And sometimes when you notice that on your skin, you'll put your hand on there and you'll notice that you can't feel quite the same. The tips of your fingers, the feeling you start to lose. Even in your extremities, you may not be able to feel your feet, your ankles, or your calves. And it's highly likely at some point you'll have the inability to swallow. When that happens, when it's very painful, your throat is so dry, you are literally potentially minutes away from death. With that said, we obviously want to find out methods and ways to keep that from happening to us. And we need to kind of start with the first and the most important thing is all those dangerous things that can be found in and around water. There can be some significant, dangers that we want to try to avoid. So many of the things we've probably heard in our life and maybe not known exactly what they were. And ultimately, most of them, getting to know them there's no problem ultimately, but the solution is almost always the same when it comes to defeating things like dysentery, giardia, hookworms. All of these things ultimately cause different parts of our bodies to have some failure going on. And the symptoms can be a little bit different for each of those as well, but the result as far as fixing the problem is almost always the same. How are we going to purify our water? That's the only way to avoid all these potential problems. Purifying the water. That might mean boiling. It might mean adding some sort of an iodine tablet or liquid. There are different tablets out there that do a great job, like chlorine tablets, things like that. Not like your pool chlorine tablets, but they're chlorine-based water purification tablets. So we'll get into a little bit more about those purification processes. We're not going to get into everything. This is almost like a video that we could probably do an advanced video on as well, and try to get into some more advanced methods of collecting, more advanced methods of storing water and purifying water. But ultimately, the easiest way to start with is the most simple, and that's rain. Hopefully you've got something like a fabric of some sort or a plastic of some sort that you can fashion to channel the water into a container. Hopefully you've taken some kind of container with you, or you can find some sort of container, whether that's water bottle, canteen, something along those lines. Well, we fashion a simple layout where we have the water running downhill into a container and we collect rainwater. That's the most efficient one as well. So we're able to let the rain itself do all the work, and it's nice and simple. Now, a second method would be collecting it in the next purest form, which would be dew. So we basically have the temperature drop in the evening that basically condenses the water via the temperature, and it builds up on vegetation, rocks, pretty much anything that's around. Hopefully you've got some sort of cloth, fairly clean, maybe a handkerchief, something like that, where you can actually, I've done it where I've just tied a couple of handkerchiefs to my legs and go walking through a field. And once they become saturated, you just drink. You just wring it out into your mouth and drink as much as you can. You keep drinking until it dries up. If you feel full with water, then go ahead and try to preserve some of that water. If it's there, collect it as long as you can potentially get it off the grass or vegetation. Now be careful of vegetation, be mindful of the things that are poisonous. You don't want to be pulling vegetation or pulling water off of poisonous plants, things like that. So be very careful with that. The next best method probably is plants. We're only going to cover one particular plant because there can be some real problems with plants. A lot of people misidentify some plants, and that's one of the reasons I'll bring up grapevine today. And we'll talk about the dangers of grapevine if you're in certain parts of the country. So there's a lot of grapevines across the country. It's probably one of the more widespread forms of water that we could find in a plant. But some areas have a lookalike that's dangerous, and so we need to be careful of that. It's called the Canadian moonseed. It's very similar to a grapevine. Obviously, it's a vine, but there are a couple of key features that you want to be on the lookout for. The first of which is the Canadian moonseed lacks the tendrils, the little round curly tendrils that'll come off on a wild grape. So it doesn't have those at all. Secondly, the attachment, where the stem attaches to the leaf, is pretty important. So on the Canadian moonseed, the stem actually attaches towards the middle of the leaf itself versus the end. So that's another important one. And then lastly, if you take the seed and you open it up, the Canadian moonseed has a crescent-shaped seed inside. That's definitely confirmation that you're dealing with the poisonous version of grapeseed. So be very careful once you identify that in your area. Try to check some things out before you go out and about anyway. Do a little research on what's in your area, poisonous plants, poisonous animals. It's always a good idea to do that anyway. Now, there's plenty of other types of plants out there. You've got thistle that you can chew on. Obviously, take the thistles, the prickly pointies off there, and you can chew on that, and you can get a lot of water out that, spit out the roughage when you're done. Plenty of cactus type things. Prickly pear is another good one, holds a lot of moisture. There's plenty of other things out there. Those are a little bit more regional, though, to where you might be located. I challenge you to dig into that a little bit and find out if there's some other sources that are near you. Additionally, we talked about creeks that may look dry. If we dig down, water might begin to surface. If that water does come up, then there might have the option to collect some of that water. Now, initially, it's going to be a little bit dirty. You can skim off some of that on the top, but just allow it a little bit of time. It'll settle out and clear up on the top. Again, you can scoop that off of there. Don't just think just because it's gone through all that sand that it's going to be perfectly clean. Remember, when we're collecting water like this, we always want to boil it. We've got to purify water to ensure that we're not going to get sick. One of the first ways we want to take water is just act more like a filter at first. If you have grass around, create kind of a small bird's nest with that grass and set that grass inside of a handkerchief. And then pour the water over the bird's nest of grass down through the handkerchief into your container. That's step one, just getting it filtered of the major things. It'll pick up most of that stuff. Secondly, you're going to need to boil it. And once it comes to a boil, you're going to need at least 5 minutes of boiling to have your best chance of killing everything off as much as possible. Now, again, we talked a little bit about treating that. If you do have some tablets, some iodine, things like that, will actually help that water. It's not going to taste the best all the time. It might turn it a little bit reddish as well. But it's safe to drink. So again, not a ton of methods to make that other than boiling it. So creating a fire, obviously, might be one of the challenges that you're going to have. Being able to start a fire, that's typically shelter, water, fire, and food is kind of the order that we're going to be going to make sure that, we're keeping ourselves in the right order of things. But ultimately, you find that water, fire is going to need to be next. You're gonna want to concentrate on it, and we'll do some videos on that as well. Probably have a basic one, and maybe do some advanced videos as well. Now, carrying water can be a challenge. Some places of the world it's a lot easier. You got bamboo, you got different things that you can kind of act as permanent storage. And a lot of times we're just relying on the small amount of water we may have taken with us that day, or something trash that we come across, or something we can fashion into a container. Very few things feel really comfortable about, but if you have come across particular animals, we know the Native Americans have used bladders and stomachs of animals to be able to carry water in. Definitely something you could look into, a little bit more advanced methods there as well. A lot of people use gourds throughout the Midwest, where they had different types of squash that was available to them. They would let that harden, hollow that out, put a cap on the top of it, use the top itself sometimes, and be able to store water in that and carry water with it. Now, we can talk a little bit about the ability to use a solar still. A lot of people say, well, that's one of the best ways. It is. It's a really good way. Ultimately, you're pulling the moisture out of the ground or any vegetation that you might put in it. You could even use seawater in a solar still. It's a much more advanced process, and you have to have clear plastic. And what I find is most people don't carry a lot of clear plastic around with them just by chance. Now, if you're camping or hiking, yeah, you could carry something in a pack, and that would be a smart thing to do. Having a backup plan, right? But in a lot of cases, most people don't have that ability. And so we'll do that in one of our more advanced classes. So let's talk about kind of the final rules for water. Wild water, how we want to treat wild water when we come across it. These are just good reminders, little tidbits of things you want to try to avoid, if at all possible, and things that you want to do as well, just when thinking about water. First of which is, if you have had a lack of water for an extended period of time and you're starting to feel the effects of that, you probably don't want to eat any meats, especially higher proteins, things that take a lot to break down, because that requires a need for some more water, and we're just going to exacerbate the problem more so. You also don't want to forget that just because it's cold outside doesn't mean you're not sweating. In a survival situation, typically they say you might need a half gallon of water in a very idle day. But if you're active and you're moving a lot, you're building a shelter, you're having to work to get things the way you need it to survive, you could be burning up to a gallon a day. And a lot of people forget in cold weather to stay hydrated, and that's a big mistake. Because again, being dehydrated starts first with your brain. When those first little things start to happen, it's a mental issue right away, and you start to make mistakes. So don't forget to hydrate even when it's cold out. You've probably seen some people do this. Most people probably wouldn't, but untreated water like urine, it still needs to be treated. The solar still is a great one for that, because you can take that moisture, rehydrate a lot of, even hydrating the soil itself, but the condensation in a solar still doesn't create a problem for you, so you're able to use urine. Otherwise, you're going to have to boil it significant amounts of that as well. That's definitely a possibility. I just don't see a lot of people thinking they're wanting to do it, but people get desperate. Another big thing is just treat water with the utmost respect. Sometimes every little ounce makes a huge difference. So treat it as such. Don't waste it in any way whatsoever when you finally find some. When it rains, put out as many containers as possible. Try to collect as much as possible. Again, that's the easiest way of getting a good amount collected. So spend plenty of time trying to create those containers, if at all possible, with a limited amount of energy that's there. When you think about collecting, don't just collect what you think you're going to need based on yesterday's need. You want to stockpile this water. You want to create a reserve of water as much as possible. So if it's there, spend the time. Again, it's our number 2 item. We need water more than we need food. You can last a lot longer without food than you can without water. So don't waste any time. And lastly, do not ever assume the water's clean. Always treat the water. Always boil it. If that's your only option, take the time and boil it just to be sure. It only takes one mistake to debilitate you and completely take you out of the game. And the only way you can get back in that game is by drinking probably twice as much water as you collected the first time and didn't treat. So keep that in mind. So I hope that helps you kind of understand how important water is. Don't take it for granted. Take the time to learn these things. Go out into the woods, start identifying some of these plants, start learning how long you've got to clean this water, to filter this water, to treat the water. Try to find ways in which you can build containers and advance your skills a little bit. It's never fun figuring it out when it's too late. We always want to try to push these skills a little bit ourselves. And trust me, when you go to turn that sink water on after an event where you've been out of water for almost 2 days, you will never take water for granted again. So if you like this kind of content, please hit the like button down below, click the bell. I got some more videos and some good ideas coming up here pretty soon I'd like to try out as well. Check out some of my previous videos, and we'll catch you in the next one.